Mm. Okay, welcome to Poo2Play. My name is Dr. Sam Ballington, and I am a researcher in the child and family space and the founder of the Association of Child and Family Coaches. And I'm here today, as always, with the wonderful Charmaine. Charmaine,
Hello, I'm Charmaine Champ and I'm a continence sleep and understanding emotions consultant here at Clear Steps Consultancy.
okay, if you've listened to our first couple of episodes, you'll probably have noticed that there's a phrase that we keep coming back to. And that's that everything is connected. We like that, don't we,
We do,
Charmaine?
we do.
Everything is
Yeah,
connected. Whether we're talking about gut health or we're talking about behavior, play, emotions, or communication,
yeah.
we keep
Inside,
finding
outside the
ourselves.
body, it's all connected, isn't it?
Yeah, inside and outside. We keep finding ourselves looking beneath that surface, don't we?
Yeah,
Rather than just stopping at what we can see outside of the surface. So today we're going to be exploring something that many families find incredibly difficult, and that's meltdowns, mood swings, and those moments where it feels like a child has completely lost control, which can lead to parents or carers feeling like they have lost control as well.
yeah.
And these experiences, they can be upsetting for children and the adults that are supporting them. But one of the things we're going to look at today and, in a little bit more detail is that they're not really random, are they? So Charmaine, when we're talking about meltdowns today, are we really just talking about behavior, or do you think there's more to it?
Well, it's definitely more to it.
Mhm.
So when we're seeing that big explosion or that big emotion that we may be seeing, maybe our children are coming out with words. So maybe there's like lots of like shouting, or I say because sometimes it sounds a bit like that, doesn't it? That sort of that gritted teeth, like that
Mm,
real sort of anger that's sort of coming out. When we're sort of seeing this is a build up.
mm,
This is our children's emotions, their body building up that they can then not be able to regulate that anymore. It's their what's happening inside, suddenly we are then able to see outside. So when we see those behaviors, it may be, like we say, something that they're shouting or, you know, swearing or, saying. It could be that they're running away. We're asking them to come and do X, Y, Z, and they're gone. And you're
yeah.
like, why are they running off? Come back here, whatever that may be. It could be that, you know, whatever that is, it can present in so many different ways. And it's what we call that sort of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or flop response. And what that is it's what's happening inside our body and what's happening in our brain specifically.
Yeah.
So,
And I think understanding the brain actually changes everything, doesn't it?
yeah.
Because one of the simplest ways to think about um, our brain and how it works is that the brains are constantly scanning the world around us. They're always on the go, aren't they? And they're asking whether we're safe enough to learn, if we're safe enough to connect, to explore, and of course to cope. And most of the time, we don't actually even notice it's happening because it's just automatic. It's part of being a human or alive. But if the brain starts to pick up signals that something doesn't quite feel right, and you mentioned, the fight or flight there, whether that's physical discomfort or just sort of layers of uncertainty and even sensory overload,
Mhm.
it can actually move into a protection mode. So, for example, one of my children has a sensory processing difference or difficulty, and loud noises can trigger a fear within her. And there is a funny story. Well, it wasn't funny at the time, but she'd experienced previously at a birthday party some loud balloons popping,
Yeah.
and that
The old
made
balloons. It always
me.
seems to be balloons, doesn't
I
it?
know. And we'd later down the line, so a few weeks later, we'd gone to a children's festival, very busy, and we were in this queue to meet a Paw Patrol character. So it was quite a few years ago now. And she saw a balloon really far at the top of a tent that someone had obviously let go and it had floated away. She saw this balloon and she connected that with um, what she'd experienced at this party. And she legged it out the tent. She must have been about three, I think, three or four. Legged it out this tent in the middle of this busy festival. So that fear had completely overtaken her brain to the fact that she didn't even mind that she wasn't near mummy and daddy anymore. She just needed to be out of there. So obviously we're like, what do we do? I have to run after her. Husband has to hold the place in the queue because we've been queuing for ages, but try and get her back in and sort of share with her that it was completely safe. And we have this amazing photo with it was the bulldog that's like a
Yeah.
um builder type thing.
Yeah.
And with my daughter just completely trying to wiggle out of my hands and get out of there. And I look back and I'm like, oh, why did we force that photo? But it was that is what is happening in our children's brains, and it's that emotional overload, it's a stress, and it's a protection mode,
Yeah.
and that's not something that children choose to do. It's something their nervous system does to try and keep them safe. And
Yeah.
once we understand that, we actually start to look at behavior very differently. And we stop asking what is wrong with this child. And instead, we rephrase that question and that exploration to what might this child's brain and body be responding to?
Yeah, definitely. So it's, I think when you sort of, that's a great example. And I think so many people will be able to relate to that as well. And I think it's so, when you, so often you sort of think, but they know, it's Paw Patrol. Why would they be running away from Paw Patrol? Because they love Paw Patrol. But it's that realization that it's actually unconscious, isn't it? And I think that's the part that I think so many of us don't always realize, that it's actually unconscious. It's not a conscious thing that our children are doing. And I think the fact that it's our children are scanning, they're scanning constantly inside and outside of their body, what's happening with their breathing, with their digestive system, with their tummy, are they full? Are they hungry? Are they thirsty? What is actually happening? They're all things that are just naturally happening, aren't they? And it's not, we can't just, we can't, our children can't just say, oh yeah, this is the reason why I'm doing that,
Yeah.
because they have to be in that, it's protecting them. And it
Mhm.
sort of goes back to that innate feeling, isn't it? Yeah, definitely. Um, so when we're thinking about our children sort of like melting down, um, we're also thinking about our children sort of shutting down as well, aren't we? So
Mhm.
we've mentioned before about that sort of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or flop. They're all just like words that we sort of have reeled off there, but they're actually big things in their own. So it's, we could just, it could be that we're seeing lots of tears.
Mhm.
And you just sort of think, oh, why are you always crying?
Mhm.
You know, I was out recently and a, a family walked past and just, will you stop whinging? And it was, you sort of, it's a natural thing that we do, and it's not a judgment on anybody. It's
Mhm.
not, it's just sort of, and at that time it was late at night. The child may have been tired. You don't know how much sleep they'd had the night before. Were they hungry? That type of thing. And is their body just saying, I
Yeah.
just don't feel right now, and I'm just like, oh no, I don't want to do that. Oh no, and it sounds whingy, doesn't it? It sounds
Mhm.
like whining, but
And we've
actually,
all heard it, haven't we? We've
yeah,
all heard it, and it's like, oh no,
yeah.
please stop.
But then when you sort of look at it from like a parent's point of view, it's
Mhm.
not just our children that are going through this. Us as parents, we're going through that as well.
Absolutely.
Did we get enough sleep last night? Are we eating and drinking regularly to regulate our bodies? And then our children come in and then add to that.
Mhm.
They're not actually adding to it. It's just that we need to make sure that our body is
Taking time to
prepared.
regulate ourselves,
Yes.
absolutely. And I think we often forget about ourselves, don't we, as well?
Yeah,
But
definitely.
I think that the body, when they're doing this, they are asking, aren't they, am I safe?
Yeah,
Aren't they? And if the body is saying no, this is where we get to what we're going to call the brain alarm, isn't it?
yeah,
And I really like the idea of thinking about it as a brain alarm because that's something most of us can actually relate to. Because you can think about a smoke alarm. If a smoke alarm goes off in your home, you don't get cross with the alarm. Actually, I do sometimes. Um,
but that may be
you
dependent on what's happening around you or
exactly
inside you.
that. You look instead for what's triggered it.
Yeah,
So children's brains work in a similar way. If their brain believes something isn't right, it will respond to in a way that tries to protect them. That protection might look very different from one child to another. So you might have those what some people label as temper tantrums, or you might have that running away, or you might have that whinging. Some children become loud or angry or physically expressive. We've got the tearful and the clingy, the withdrawn, or we can have completely shut down as well. The important thing to remember, though, is that these responses aren't signs of a child choosing to make our life difficult.
no,
They're the signs that the brain is trying to manage something that feels overwhelming in that moment.
yeah. And I think sometimes if we sort of think about it with the upstairs, downstairs type brain. So when we sort of think about sort of the downstairs brain, we're thinking about those like internal organs. So we're thinking about the digestive system, like we said earlier, whether we've had something to eat, drink, our breathing, that type of thing. It then comes through and it comes through to that where that brain alarm is, which is the amygdala, which I never say right, which I apologize. I always say amygdala, but I don't think it is said like that. But we say brain alarm. That's where it comes through, and that's where we're having that scanning, isn't it? So it's scanning is are we protective? And then we've got that upstairs brain, which is where we get to that thinking side of things. And that's where, let's say, like if it was something children, say toileting, for instance, um, if our children are going through to a toilet and it's a public toilet, for instance. I was out recently and there was a little girl in a public toilet with her sister. It looked like a sister, an older child. They probably looked about 7, maybe the youngest was about 4,
Mm,
7 and 4. And the little girl kept going, it's going to go off, it's going to go off. And the other little girl was going, it's okay, I'll hold your ears. So she
the
was covering
hand.
the ears. So I couldn't work out whether it was the tap that was making a noise. So
Mm,
there wasn't any adults around. So I said, would you like me to put the tap on for you? Because I thought she was worried about the tap. And the little girl went, no, it's okay. So I was like, okay, I'll just, stranger. Obviously, I didn't want to, but I just
push
could
it.
see that they were
Mm,
struggling. And then I'd washed my hands in the public toilet and then walked round to the hand dryer. And then I could see the little girl looking and I said, shall I not use the hand dryer? And she said, no. I said, it's okay. I won't. I'll go and get some. I got some paper towel instead.
mm,
So
mm.
for that little girl, her alarm system was telling her body that the noise was a danger.
Yeah.
I mean, our thinking brain was telling us that it's just a hand dryer and actually it's just going to go on for a few moments. But for that little girl, she couldn't access that thinking part of the brain.
Flooded with cortisol,
Yeah,
wasn't she?
yeah,
And that was it. So that bottom brain, when it's flooded, we can't reach the
yeah,
upstairs brain and we don't have that reasoning.
yes,
And that is the same for adults,
yeah,
in situations, maybe not necessarily with a hand dryer situation, but something else. If there is something that we are fearful of, whether it makes sense or not, at that moment, if we are flooded, we can't make sense, real sense of what is happening around us. And for other people, it may have no logic, but to us, you know, we have had at some point in our lives some kind of experience or read something or, you know, and it has therefore caused that flooding of the downstairs brain, which means no reasoning can happen. And so we end up in a stage of meltdown, don't we?
yeah. And it means we just can't access that part, can we? So all of that where, and I think when we sort of see that, when we're looking at our children, sometimes we are looking at our children through adult eyes when we're
Mhm.
thinking, it's just, just go and sit down. Well, no, because the seats feels uncomfortable. Well, it doesn't feel uncomfortable to me. Well, that's because that's not your body. Do you see what I
Mhm.
mean? And it's like I don't think as adults we don't do that intentionally, put our views, our children, but sometimes we're looking at it through our reasoning and able
Yeah.
to access that thinking part of the brain. And sometimes our children aren't there yet. We
Yeah.
need to meet them where they are
Yeah.
to help them understand that, don't we? It's really difficult
Absolutely.
for them to be able to, to
And
understand that, isn't it?
remind ourselves as well that our experiences are, different, from one adult to another, from one child to another. Experiences are very different. So when an alarm goes off, it might be that we, see what we call a full meltdown, or a temper tantrum, which is not something I would generally use, but it's a term we're familiar with. But it could also just as easily be a child becoming unusually quiet, refusing to join in, bursting into tears, my daughter running away from a balloon, and
Yep.
the strangers apparently and across the field were a lot safer than this balloon was in her mind. It made no sense to us, but there we go. And bursting into tears, I think the most stressful for adults to understand is things like bursting into tears over sort of small everyday sort of requests or demands. And I think
It seems small to us, doesn't it?
seems more
But
to
it's
us,
not.
but that's it. It
It,
feels like there's no reason. But actually what's happened is that the child has got to a point where the brain has reached the limit.
yeah,
And we, whether we care to admit it or not, we as adults have also reached those stages, haven't we?
yeah,
Where we have lost control sometimes over the smallest thing. And that's because lots and lots and lots of little things can pile on. The overload, the whining child, you mentioned that, the whining that can sometimes trigger after a long day. The adult is tired, like you said. We end up with the adult having their own meltdown, and then
yeah.
everybody's melting down and we have a great time.
Oh.
Um,
But I think that brings us back to why we talk about Poo2Play, isn't it?
mhm. Yeah,
Because it is all connected, isn't it?
it
And we're
really is.
thinking about that gut brain connection. We're thinking about what's happening inside our body that can directly influence those thoughts and feelings as well, isn't it? So, yeah,
Absolutely. One of the things I absolutely love about this podcast and how we've sort of come together, Charmaine, is that we're constantly joining the dots between different areas of children's development that people may sometimes think of separately. So the brain is actually listening to the information from the whole body all of the time, outside and inside. It's listening to whether a child is physically comfortable, emotionally secure, well rested, nourished, connected to the people that are around them. and able to cope with the demands that they're facing at that particular time as well. And that's why conversations about gut health, along with play, behavior, regulation, and so on, all belong together.
Yep.
They aren't separate conversations. They're all parts of that same story from poo to play.
Yeah. Because if a child is struggling with any one part of that, it's then going to influence other parts. So if a child is in nursery, for instance, and we're arriving at nursery and we're, the activity is, I don't know, painting, and we need to sit down to do that particular activity, just sit down. Maybe the body is not prepared and it's not ready to sit down. And then if they are encouraged or kept encouraging to sit down, it becomes too much. But actually, we need to look at not just what's happening in that moment, what happened before.
Yeah,
You know, they're,
absolutely.
they've just, said goodbye to mum or dad or carer, whoever that may be, who's dropped them off. They've come into a place that they now need to build up that connection with someone else to actually feel safe in that moment, don't they? To feel like, okay, yeah, I can do this. Or they may not have had enough sleep, like we were talking about before, wasn't it? That sleep is all connected.
Yeah.
Or maybe they usually have breakfast on the way, but
Hmm.
actually didn't get time for breakfast. But it's okay, you can have breakfast when you get there. But
Yes.
actually, they're really hungry.
Yeah.
And then we'd sort of go and slap back into this activity.
Yeah.
We
And I
need to
don't know
hold them.
about you, but I do get a serious case of the hangries when I get hungry too. And honestly,
We have a lot of
so
that in this household. There are, I
so
would no names mentioned, but there are certain people in this household that we do struggle with that.
and I think that for our practitioners listening who've just heard that example of, children coming into the setting and they're already sort of, kicking off on the day, um, instead of sort of, you know, taking that as a sort of negative approach straight away, I'm gonna use one of our other favorite words now, and that is to become curious. So we're going to be detectives and we're going to find out what is going on. So rather than asking, how do I stop this behavior? We want to begin with, what has today looked like for the child so far? And what has their body been coping with? Why might they need, why might they need, what might they need from me right now? So in that moment, with that example being dropped off at nursery, we've not had any breakfast. Okay, child is hungry or hangry. And
Yeah.
so let's get them some breakfast. Let's get them fed, because going back to Maslow, we know that we need to feel safe, secure, but also feel fed, and to be able to continue with the day. We
And
can't
they're
learn
often, that's
when we're
great though.
hungry.
Yeah, because we often talk about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of sort of saying that they're the basic needs. But actually, they're far from basic, really, are they? Because it's the foundations
That's
of
it.
what we can then,
Build
everything
on.
else, to
Hmm.
be able to, they always say it's Maslow before Bloom, don't they? To be able
Yeah,
to then be able to learn. But you need to have those foundations, don't you? You need that
absolutely.
to
And
then be able to progress.
I love that you've called it foundations instead of the basic needs. I think that is something we could try and start to adopt when we talk about theories and things like that, and how we can then implement that into what we do, with our own work. Because um, while we will use these theories a lot, I do think, it is the basic needs, and what people mean by that and what the theory means by that is that it's the minimum needs
Yeah,
of what a child needs. But it is, I think the foundation is key,
yeah.
especially when we talk about the foundation years and the foundation stage, and we have such a core, we're going way off track here, but
No,
we have
it's
such a
all relevant.
core
It's all relevant.
core a core sort of, um focus on the importance of the foundation. I think reframing
Yeah.
those needs as
And I think so
foundational.
often, like in health, because obviously we're talking about education, but when we're talking about
Mm,
health, so often as we're sort of identifying different difficulties, health needs that are coming up, it's like we're sort of jumping ahead and we don't look at those foundation needs.
Yeah.
So often those foundation needs are the ones that go by the by, because it's almost like, are they drinking? Yes, they're drinking. Fantastic. But are we actually looking at how much we're drinking?
Hmm.
And,
Exactly that.
for example, there's lots of other things we can look at, but, and obviously when we're thinking about poo and wee and, are we actually looking at that in more detail, that foundation, before we look at this, the higher needs? So it's foundation, but for education, health, social care, wherever we may be supporting children, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the whole child, isn't it? It's the whole child. And I think that we are so used to in sort of the work that I do, we're so used to looking at the whole child and the holistic child, but we still forget about some of that gut health. It's not necessarily talked about. We look at the brain and we look at the learning and we look at other developmental areas, but this is why bringing it all together and really looking really inside of what's going on is so important as well. And, those questions help lead us towards support instead of trying to sort of like control the behavior.
Yeah. And I think it's almost like when we don't understand why, why is this, if you're in a setting, like nursery or something, why is this child constantly kicking or hitting? Why
Mhm.
are they doing it? We must stop this. We must stop it. Because
Mm.
obviously that's the adult's protective mode there, because they're trying to protect the other children and they don't understand, so we must stop it. But actually,
Mhm.
if we understand what that child needs, we will then help that child and the other children. It's, isn't it? It's like our protective part that is
Exactly,
coming in.
exactly. Behavior though, the behavior like the biting or the hitting or whatever is often the part that's easiest to see. So that's the bit that we want to tackle. But
Yes.
it's rarely the whole story, is it? And that's something we've talked about in episode 1. And it's something we'll continue to come back to throughout this sort of podcast journey that we're on together. The behavior matters because it's telling us something, but it's usually just like a chapter in a wider story. And so, or an episode in like a series. It's just one part. So if we pause and we stay curious, because we want to
Yeah.
stay curious always, we can actually begin to, and another phrase that we'll keep on using is, begin looking beneath the surface and discover opportunities to support children in ways that will genuinely make a difference rather than simply managing in that moment, because trying to manage in that moment isn't actually going to make long-term differences. It's just
Yeah.
going to pause
And I
the
think that with
behavior.
when you say about managing as well, isn't it? It's sort of, it's often a phrase that's used, isn't it? We've got to manage this.
Mm,
Again, we've got to control this. We've got to
yeah,
manage this. But actually, if we start thinking about, is that child regulated?
exactly.
Are
Exactly.
they regulated? Is their nervous system regulated? Which is leading to how their brain is actually responding. And if you're seeing this hitting, throwing, spitting,
Mm,
throw, whatever that may be,
mm.
it's telling us that they're not regulated. And actually, if they're not regulated, that's what we're saying, is it? That's the support. They need that support.
Absolutely. And this is one thing I talk to my parents about and also my practitioners. So, everybody who's learning with me, everybody who reads my textbook as well, if they're doing their apprenticeship in early years or their diploma, you will see me talk about and try and eradicate that terminology, managing behavior. Temper tantrums and managing behavior are two of my pet sort of hate phrases, if you like. And because I'm very, very pro co-regulation leading to self-regulation, and that is what we need, and that is what we want to really switch our brains to when we're working with children, is to understand that. And of course, for the parents in us or any of the adults, we want the same as well. We still need to have somebody to co-regulate with, and we also need to be able to self-regulate too. And sometimes I think we forget about the adults in this in all of these stories. And I try to remind, the practitioners, take a breath before, you've had a busy day, lots of stuff going on, lots of noise, lots of sounds, you're tired, you might not have eaten for a few hours. Take a breath before you walk through the door of your own home and you're faced with mummy, 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 or daddy, 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 you're home. And, it's all, because
Yeah.
even though those might be positive sounds, it is, you've not had time to switch off. And, any parent, anyone going home after a long, busy day at work, tired, or whatever. But that's relevant to what I'm, to today, because think about the moment when you feel like that.
Yeah.
And then imagine being a child and not actually understanding why you feel like that.
And trying to make sense of it all, aren't they? It's you've got these feelings, just like you just
Absolutely.
got these feelings, but you don't know why or what they are and what to do
Exactly.
about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think that if I could leave our listeners today with just one thought, it would be um, the next time you see a child having a meltdown or struggling to cope, try to pause before reaching for a judgment. And instead of asking, how do I stop this? Because we want to sort of remove away from that management,
Yeah.
ask yourself instead, what might this child's brain and body be trying to tell me? You won't always have the answer, and that's okay. But asking better questions is often where better understanding begins, because children don't need adults who are perfect. They need adults who are curious enough to look beyond the behavior, and compassionate as well, compassionate enough to keep searching for what might be happening underneath.
Because every story has, or every behavior has a story.
Yeah. From poo
Who
to
to
play,
play? We're
we're
here to
here to help you
help you
understand
understand
what
what
might
might
be
be
happening
happening beneath
beneath the
the surface.
surface. And you know what, Charmaine? I bet our listeners are loving that little end bit that we're trying to do. And I'm going to pop in here. Let's see if we can get some bets on in the comments, right? On which episode we managed to perfect it by.
Yeah,
Let's see if anyone can get it right.
we will
Um,
practice, we promise.
but yeah, lovely, lovely to record with you again
Yeah,
today,
you
Charmaine.
too.
Brilliant
I'll speak to you
conversation.
all soon.